Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Smash JT. Did GameStop just signal to the entire retro game scene that used games are dropping in value dramatically? Smash JT. GameStop is one of those companies that I am constantly amazed is still in business, even though they provide a service that a lot of people use. There are better avenues for people to go to get video games than walk into a GameStop, especially if you're looking to save money. GameStop is typically not the first choice that comes to mind. When they had their most recent earnings call, they pretty much announced that people are catching on to this. A net loss of $500 million, or at least I'll round up to that, because when you get up that high, who really cares how many millions it is? GameStop is in a lot of trouble right now, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details and the numbers to bore you guys, but I will focus on one specific thing that they said about the used game scene. While our Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales were strong, we anticipate that our fourth quarter sales will skew more towards hardware than initially planned, which, along with underperformance of certain titles, weakness in pre-owned and recent sales promotions, will result in fourth quarter earnings that are below our previous expectations. One thing in particular they said really struck a chord with me. GameStop is well known for making a lot of their money from selling used games. And basically in this statement they said, we foresee our used game sales tracking downward, meaning there's not as much demand for them right now. And what does that necessarily mean for the broader audience? The collectors out there, the people that are buying and selling games on eBay and Amazon, or with friends trading on Facebook groups. Used game sales were down 13.4% at GameStop. More and more publishers are offering online access to their older titles, and they're selling them for a fraction of what the disc or cartridge would cost at the GameStop stores. Basically saying, all these NES classics, Super Nintendo classics, and the Neo Geo classic, the rise of the classic minis, the PlayStation Mini, they're everywhere right now. And it's a very easy avenue for casual gamers to pick up and play, even if it's not made, we'll say, high quality. I'm looking at anything made by @Games. But any of these retro games are playable on modern TVs for a fraction of the price. And at the end of the day, yes, people want the original. Yes, there's a lot of authentic collectors out there, but they're a very, very small percent of actual gamers out there. And I feel like a lot of us get caught up in our own world sometimes, where we feel like we all want the original game. We all have to have that original Earthbound game and play it on the cart to get the real, true nostalgic feeling of when we were a kid. But that's not necessarily true, especially for everybody else who's not in deep with video games. They just want to play the games. They want to revisit their childhood. They don't care how they do it. And as long as it's on the cheap, they're fine with doing it that way. And these publishers are proving that by selling these mini consoles in droves right now, regardless of the quality of them. And I think it's very interesting that GameStop is admitting that used games are declining in sales. They're not making the money they used to, even with all the sales that they're doing. The buy two, get one free, or 33% off, or all these slashed prices on N64 games is doing nothing for their bottom line. And yes, part of that is probably because their shipping costs are outrageous, but it also signals a trend to the broader market. When I see games really cheap on GameStop, and I'm not buying them because, one, I'm concerned if they're even authentic games or if they're fakes, because there's been a big issue with those, I start wondering, do I even need to buy these games in the first place? Why do I want these games? I ask myself all these other questions because the games are so cheap that I'm not jumping on them at GameStop. And then furthermore, I don't want to go get them somewhere else because, oh, I saw it for cheaper on GameStop, but I didn't buy it there. So why would I go somewhere else and buy it if I'm not really sure I want this? And it brings in so many more questions than I ever had in the first place that it stops me from buying the games anyways, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Maybe I'm just ranting right now. But as far as buying used games, I am not buying them as often as I used to. And that's my point of all of this. I feel like there was a big, mad rush of buying retro games over the past 5 years or so. And I was a part of that, where I just wanted to keep buying these and keep adding to my collections. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I have pretty much all the games that I wanted to get. And now it's just overkill if I keep buying more and more of these retro games. And I feel like, a broader scope, a lot of people are starting to feel that way about retro video games. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And when a lot of people start going that direction of not having the interest that they once did in buying these retro games, it lowers the demand, and lowering the demand lowers the value of all these games. And I honestly feel this is GameStop signaling to the world that we are now not starting the retro game crash, but are in the midst of it. It's actually happening, and the numbers are there to back it up. The retro game scene is not what it used to be when it comes to buying and selling the games. The value just isn't there because the demand isn't nearly at the peak that it once was. Think about it. It's so much easier to plug and play these consoles with HDMI outs than it is to buy the retro game, blow in the cart if it's on an NES, trying to get it to work on a modern television. It's a big hassle. And a lot of people, for the cost of it, don't want to put the time and effort into that. They just want to play the game. I feel like if we step out of our own worlds, we see the broader scope of everyone is they don't want to waste their time with things that aren't necessarily necessary to do. They just want to plug and play the games. And that's why these mini consoles are so successful, and that's another reason why the games are not selling like they once did in the used game market. Do I see it turning around? Not necessarily, not anytime soon at least. Right now I liken this situation to that whole boiling the frog fable, where if you put boiling water in front of a frog and they jump in it, they'll jump right out of it. They don't want to deal with that. But if you put a frog in water that's normal room temperature and slowly start turning up the heat, eventually they'll just die. They don't notice around them that it's heating up because it's all a part of the natural circumstances and flowing, where it just feels natural to them. They don't want to leave it. That's what I feel like the used game market is right now, where it's been slowly turning up the heat as time's gone by, and everyone who's a collector is not noticing that nobody's really that interested in this anymore. And that's not something people want to hear, really. Unfortunately, because I have a lot of retro games and a lot of value in them, and if this is true, it's going to be dropping the value of them. Thankfully, I collect games because I love them, not because I want to make money off of them. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the whole GameStop situation with the used games, and I don't necessarily see them coming out of this alive. They're probably going to sell off. They're probably going to break up the company and go in different directions. But as far as you and I are concerned and the used game family, they're not worth what they once were, and I see the prices dropping even further before they start rising again. That's how I feel about this situation, but let me know how you feel in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.